June 25th, 2023, Southport, North Carolina. A Mooney M20R. Registration. November 13. Lima Victor rolled down runway 23, lifted into the air, and just a couple of minutes later, it slammed into someone's backyard, erupting in flames. The pilot, 69-year-old John Luke Lucarelli from Myrtle Beach, was killed. Now here's the kicker. This was not bad luck, and it wasn't some hidden gremlin in the engine. No, this airplane was already screaming, "Do not fly me." The mechanic had flat out said it was unairworthy, and people on the ground actually saw oil dripping before it even took off. So the real question isn't what broke in flight. It's why the pilot pushed forward when every red flag was right in front of him. Let's find out in this episode. Let's dig into the backstory, because this crash didn't start on the runway. It started months earlier. The airplane was a 1998 Mooney M20R Ovation. If you don't know Moonies, they're high-performance singles, sleek, fast, long-range cruisers, the kind of airplane business owners and serious private pilots love. Under the cowling, it had a Continental IO 550G engine, fuel-injected, air-cooled, about 280 horsepower. It's a strong engine, but like any machine, it only stays reliable if you follow the rules. Here's the problem. Lucarelli's Mooney had been stuck in the shop for 8 months. That's a long time for any airplane to sit idle, especially a piston engine. When engines sit, oil drains off critical surfaces, seals dry out, and corrosion can start. The maintenance tasks requested weren't unusual. Some electrical troubleshooting, brake service, fixing a vacuum hose, and patching an exhaust leak. Pretty standard squawks, but the mechanic uncovered something that really made his eyebrows shoot up: the batteries. See, the Mooney's electrical system is designed to run on 24 volts, and it uses two 24-volt batteries to do that. But when he opened it up, the mechanic found that somebody had rigged it with four 12-volt car batteries. That's not just a corner cut. That's a flat-out illegal modification. Think about trying to power your iPhone with the wrong voltage charger. Best case, it doesn't work right. Worst case, you fry the system. Airplanes are no different. Every component in that electrical system expects a stable 24 volts. When the mechanic told Lucarelli, the response wasn't, "Fix it properly." It was, "Just put those 12-volt batteries back in." And this is where the story takes a turn that's really crazy. The mechanic refused, as any responsible professional should. He flat out said, "This airplane is unairworthy." He even put that on the invoice, which is basically a written warning in bold letters. Don't fly this thing. But instead of taking the advice, Lucarelli decided he wanted his airplane back. Now let me be clear here. Under 14 CFR 91.407, after maintenance, an aircraft cannot legally be flown until it has been inspected and returned to service by a certified mechanic. That never happened here. On paper, this Mooney wasn't cleared to leave the ground. And more importantly, in reality, the airplane was still broken. But for Lucarelli, getting it back in the air seemed to matter more than getting it back in one piece. Now, jump forward to June 25th. Lucarelli finally rolls the Mooney out of the hangar and heads for the runway. And this is where things get almost unbelievable. People at Cape Fear Regional Jetport literally watched the airplane taxi and saw oil dripping from it onto the ground. Not just a light weep. Witnesses describe actual leaks. At the same time, thick white exhaust smoke was pouring out. For anyone who doesn't know engines, let me explain. White smoke from a piston engine is not normal. It can mean oil is being burned, or that something's badly off with the combustion process. Combine that with visible oil leaking, and you don't need to be a mechanic to know you're in trouble. These were flashing neon warning signs. And yet, Lucarelli kept going. He taxied all the way out to runway 23 and lined up. Now, let's stop here, because this is the moment where the crash could have been prevented. He had already been told the airplane was unairworthy. He could see the smoke. Witnesses could see the oil. Any reasonable pilot would have shut it down, called the mechanic back over and said, "We're not flying today." But he didn't. This decision is what really frustrates me, because the FAA has a rule, 91.13, careless or reckless operation. It's basically the catch-all. If you operate an aircraft in a way that endangers life or property, you're in violation. And honestly, Taxiing out with oil visibly leaking and smoke pouring out of the exhaust, that's about as reckless as it gets. And here's another point that often gets overlooked. Any flight after maintenance is one of the riskiest you can take. The FAA and industry groups hammer this over and over. Treat those flights differently. Do extended run-ups on the ground, look under the cowling for drips, start with a short hop, stay in the pattern, have an out. Mechanics themselves often call it the post-maintenance test flight risk. And what did Lucarelli do? He basically skipped every one of those safeguards. He just went straight for departure, as if the airplane were in perfect condition. And that's what makes this so tragic. Because right here, still on the ground, he had multiple chances to stop, but instead, he pushed forward. Just 3 minutes after takeoff, reality hit. Around 16:17 local time, Lucarelli's Mooney lifted off runway 23. It climbed out normally at first, but then the radio call came, engine failure, returning to runway. That's the kind of transmission every pilot dreads, and every controller or pilot on frequency knows is life or death. ADS-B data shows he started a left-hand turn, trying to bring the aircraft back to the very same runway he had just departed. But by then, the engine was already toast. The teardown told the whole story. Investigators found the oil sump accessory plug loose. In plain English, that's a plug on the bottom of the engine that helps keep oil sealed in. With it loose, oil had been leaking out. When they checked the dipstick after the crash, no measurable oil. The connecting rod had actually punched a hole right through the top of the engine case. Now let me break that down. The Continental IO 550 is a big 6-cylinder engine. Like any engine, it relies on a constant flow of oil. Oil isn't just lubrication, it's cooling, it's protection, it keeps those high-speed bearings alive. Without it, metal starts grinding on metal, heat skyrockets, and things seize in a matter of seconds. That's exactly what happened here. Bearings seized, the rod let go, and the engine destroyed itself. And here's the kicker. This wasn't random bad luck. This was the inevitable outcome of taking off with oil already leaking on the ground. The engine didn't betray him. It did exactly what engines do when you starve them of oil. Lucarelli tried to save it. He attempted the classic turn-back maneuver, aiming to get back to runway 23, but the airplane never made it. It came down in a residential yard, about half a mile short of the runway, sliding into the ground and narrowly missing a home. Wreckage photos showed the landing gear was extended, and the flaps too. That suggests he was trying to configure for a landing, probably slowing down as much as possible to hit the runway or anything flat under control. But it wasn't enough. And here's where we need to talk about what pilots call the impossible turn. It's the idea that if your engine quits after takeoff, you can just spin the airplane around and come back to the runway. Sounds simple in theory, but in reality, it almost never works unless you've planned for it. Why? Because you don't just need a 180-degree turn. You actually need closer to a 270-degree turn to line back up with the runway. That burns a ton of altitude and eats up precious seconds. The FAA and groups like AOPA have been hammering this point for years. Unless you've pre-briefed your minimum safe turnback altitude, usually something like 800, 1,000, or even more depending on the aircraft, the safer bet is almost always to land straight ahead or within 30 degrees of your departure path. Harsh as it sounds, even if that means a crash in a field, your odds are better than stalling in a turn. Lucarelli didn't have that margin. He was too low, too slow, and the airplane bled out of the sky before he could make it back. That decision, the turnback, sealed the deal. Now, let's step back and talk about the man behind the controls. John Leo Luke Lucarelli, 69 years old. He was a successful Myrtle Beach businessman with ties to Pennsylvania, remembered back home as a family man and community figure. He wasn't some rookie either. His FAA medical paperwork listed nearly 3,945 hours of flight experience. That's a lot of time in the air. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Experience doesn't cancel out human bias. His medical certificate hadn't been renewed since 2017. He was on medications for blood pressure and heart health, but nothing that would impair his judgment. So this wasn't about physical incapacity. This was about mindset. And it's a mindset we see again and again in accident reports. Pride, get-there-itis, and an emotional attachment to an airplane. When you've invested years and money into owning and flying, it can be painfully hard to admit that today isn't the day to go. And sometimes, experienced pilots actually get into more trouble because they think they can handle it. But the real takeaway here is crystal clear. Regulations like 91.7, 91.407, and 91.13 aren't just legal red tape. They exist because of crashes exactly like this. Mechanics don't mark an airplane unairworthy as a suggestion. Post-maintenance flights aren't business as usual. They require special caution. And emergency return maneuvers aren't something you invent at 500 feet. They're something you pre-brief and train for. The lessons are painfully simple. If a mechanic tells you your airplane isn't airworthy, you listen. Period. After maintenance, you run the engine, you check for leaks, you fly a short test hop, you don't go charging off. And if the engine quits after takeoff, unless you're at a known safe altitude, don't try the impossible turn. Put it down ahead and live to fly again. This crash didn't have to happen. It wasn't fate, it wasn't weather, it was the direct result of one decision: to take off in an airplane that shouldn't have left the ground. And in that moment, thousands of hours of experience meant nothing. This was preventable, and that's what makes it tragic. In aviation, the sky doesn't bend for pride or impatience. Ignore the rules, and the rules will catch you.